A $165 million Las Vegas casino collapsed in less than 2 years, not because of a sudden crisis, but because the structure behind it failed almost immediately. Why is this happening? What is being hidden beneath the surface of this project? Who is really benefiting when a property loses over $120 million in value in under 24 months? Because this was not just a failed casino. It was a financial model built on a single assumption, with no margin for error. And when that assumption broke, everything followed. But the more important question is this: was the failure accidental or built into the structure from the beginning? If you want to understand how this happened and what it reveals about Las Vegas today, take a moment to like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. The project that would become Lucky Dragon was first announced in February 2012, during a period when Las Vegas was still recovering from the aftershocks of the 2008 financial crisis. New ground-up developments were rare, capital was cautious, confidence was fragile. In that environment, a new $165 million hotel casino carried significance beyond its size. Construction began in May 2015. By September 2016, the opening timeline was finalized. A soft opening took place on November 19, 2016, followed by a grand opening on December 3, 2016. At the time, Lucky Dragon was marketed as the first newly built hotel casino in Las Vegas since 2010. That alone positioned it as a signal that development activity on the Strip was returning. But from the beginning, the vision was different. This was not designed to compete with large-scale resorts like MGM Grand or Wynn. Instead, the concept was highly targeted. Management aimed to serve Asian customers, including Chinese nationals, Asian American visitors, and regional travelers from the West Coast. The strategy was built around cultural specificity rather than scale. The property itself reflected that positioning. With only 203 rooms, a 27,500 square foot casino, and a total footprint of 2.5 acres, it was significantly smaller than most Strip resorts. The assumption was clear: a focused audience would generate consistent demand. At launch, that assumption looked disciplined. Today, it defines the contrast, because less than 2 years later, the entire property would be closed. From the beginning, the financial structure behind Lucky Dragon carried concentrated risk. This was not a large corporate-backed resort with diversified capital sources. It was a project built on layered financing that required immediate operational success. A significant portion of the funding came through the EB-5 visa program. Approximately 179 foreign investors contributed between $89 million and $98.5 million. These were not passive institutional funds. These were individual investors, many expecting both financial returns and U.S. immigration benefits. That alone created pressure. The project was not only a casino, it was also tied to a separate outcome beyond financial performance. On top of that, there was a $90 million loan from snow-covered capital. By the time default became public on September 1, 2017, roughly $48.8 to $48.9 million remained outstanding. This debt introduced fixed obligations that could not be deferred. Interest payments, principal expectations, and lender oversight created a timeline that did not allow for slow ramp-up. There was no sale-leaseback structure, no real estate investment trust absorbing property-level risk. Ownership and operational performance were tightly linked. If the casino underperformed, the financial structure had no buffer. This is where the pressure begins to build. Because when a project relies on investor capital tied to immigration outcomes, combined with active debt obligations, the margin for error is extremely thin. And in this case, that margin disappeared almost immediately. The most revealing indicator of Lucky Dragon's performance, and is not a long-term trend, it is the speed at which deterioration appeared. By September 1st, 2017, less than 9 months after the December 3rd, 2016 grand opening, snow-covered Capital had already filed a notice of default. That timing suggests that revenue and cash flow were not meeting projections almost immediately. There was no extended ramp-up period. The gap between expectation and reality appeared within the first operating cycle. In December 2017, reporting from the Las Vegas Review-Journal provided a direct snapshot of conditions on the ground. The casino floor was described as largely empty. Restaurants were quiet. Customer volume was visibly below what would be required to sustain operations. There are no strong indicators of stable EBITDA generation during this period. Instead, the available evidence points to underperformance across core segments. Gaming activity, which is typically the primary revenue driver, failed to generate sufficient traffic. Food and beverage, which depends heavily on casino footfall, showed similar weakness. This is not a case of declining performance over time. This is a case where performance never reached the required baseline. And in a structure built on immediate cash flow alignment, that distinction becomes critical. This is where the situation shifts from underperformance to structural stress. The first pressure point is fixed obligations. The $90 million loan from snow-covered Capital created immediate debt servicing requirements. With nearly $49 million still outstanding by the time of default in September 2017, the property was already under financial strain within months of opening. There was no flexibility in that structure. Payments were expected regardless of performance. The second pressure point comes from the capital structure itself. EB5 investors contributed up to $98.5 million. That capital carried expectations beyond return on investment. It was tied to immigration outcomes. When performance weakened, pressure did not only come from lenders. It extended to individual investors with legal standing and financial exposure. Then there is operating leverage. With only 203 rooms and a 27,500 square foot casino, the property had limited revenue capacity. Fixed costs such as staffing, utilities, and maintenance could not be scaled down proportionally. That means even small gaps in revenue translate into immediate losses. There was also no buffer from diversified income streams, no large convention business, no significant retail footprint, no high-margin entertainment offset. By January 4, 2018, the casino and restaurants were shut down. This was not a preventative measure. It was a response to pressure that had already materialized. At this point, the crisis was no longer theoretical. It was already underway. To understand why the pressure escalated so quickly, the broader Las Vegas market needs to be considered. In 2016 and 2017, Las Vegas was not in decline. According to data from the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority, annual visitor volume remained above 42 million. McCarran International Airport reported passenger traffic exceeding 47 million in 2017. On the surface, demand was stable, but distribution mattered more than total volume. The Central Strip continued to dominate traffic flow. Properties located near Las Vegas Boulevard's core corridor captured the majority of visitor movement. In contrast, the north end of the Strip, where Lucky Dragon was located, experienced weaker foot traffic. For smaller properties, this difference is structural. They depend on existing flow rather than generating their own. At the same time, competition for Asian-focused customers was already established. Larger strip resorts and off-strip properties were actively targeting the same demographic with broader amenities and stronger brand recognition. There was also a gradual shift in the market. Online gambling and digital betting platforms were beginning to expand. While not yet dominant, they were introducing alternative channels for gaming behavior. The macro environment was stable. But the competitive environment was not forgiving. And for a small, highly targeted property, that distinction becomes decisive. At the surface level, nothing about the timing suggested failure. Las Vegas was stable. Visitor volume remained above 42 million. Airport traffic exceeded 47 million passengers in 2017. New developments were returning after years of post-crisis hesitation. By all external indicators, the market was functioning. And yet, within that same environment, Lucky Dragon collapsed in less than 2 years. This is the central paradox. Demand existed, but not in the form this model required. The property was designed for a specific audience, with a specific experience, in a specific location. But the broader market does not distribute demand evenly. It concentrates it. It favors scale, visibility, and convenience. So while the city appeared healthy, the internal reality was different. Traffic was bypassing the property. Competition was absorbing the target customer. And fixed obligations continued regardless of utilization. The result is a structural mismatch. A business operating inside a growing market, but disconnected from the flow that sustains it. And that is what makes this model fragile over the long term. When all of these elements are placed together, the story stops being about a single failed casino. It becomes a question about structure. Lucky Dragon was not an experimental side project. It was a deliberately designed model, a property built with a clear audience, a defined identity, and a financial structure that required immediate alignment between demand and execution. There was no excess capacity, no structural buffer, no margin for prolonged adjustment. And that raises a broader issue. If a $165 million project launched in a stable market with more than 42 million annual visitors can fail within 24 months, what does that say about the tolerance for error in modern Las Vegas? Because the model has shifted. Land ownership, capital structures, and operating risk are increasingly separated. Fixed obligations remain. Competition intensifies. Customer behavior fragments. And in that environment, success is not only about attracting demand. It is about capturing the right demand in the right place at the right scale. The question is no longer whether a concept is unique. The question is whether the structure behind it can survive when conditions are less than perfect. And that is the real test that has already begun. If you want to follow more investigations like this, take a moment to like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. And if you want to go deeper, watch the next analysis on how Las Vegas financial structures are quietly reshaping the Strip.